Hey folks. So I've been asked to talk about this subject by multiple people. Some of them are dysphoric females who want to transition. Some of them are concerned parents or concerned friends, and they want to know, what I would say or what I would advise to someone who is going to transition or who is considering transition. Um, and for the most part, I do want to direct this video specifically at dysphoric female people, trans men, AFAB, trans people, however you're conceptualizing yourself. If you're considering transition and you want to hear alternative perspectives. So for context, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Cari. I'm a 22-year-old detransition woman. I blog about that, and I'm going to link my blog in the description. But so like I said, I wanna mostly talk to specifically to dysphoric female people. But I do want to take a moment first to talk to some of the parents who have written to me about this subject. And specifically to talk about the language that I'm seeing and the patterns in the messages that I am getting. Um, I think a lot of you are doing really well by your kids. I think a lot of you have your kids' best interests at heart. Um, But some of the language that I'm seeing in these messages is honestly really concerning to me. I'm seeing things like, how can I help my daughter realize that this is a delusion or a false identity or, something that she decided after spending too much time on Tumblr, whatever. Um, this is a pretty callous way to talk. This is a serious issue. This is something with, very deep, very pervasive roots in misogyny and trauma, in mental health issues, and, in all of the many and varied fucked up ways that our culture teaches people, and particularly teaches women to dissociate. Um, and social contagion is a thing, yeah, of course it is. But this is not just something that you up and decide to do after spending too much time on Tumblr. I think it's a simplistic way to frame the problem. It kind of reduces it to just another frivolous teenage girl thing. And I get it, because I think it probably defangs it a little, makes it seem less insurmountable when you're looking at it from the outside. It makes it seem maybe less confusing, less scary. But it's just not an accurate way to talk about it. It's alienating. It's dismissive of everything that the thousands upon thousands of dysphoric female people, dysphoric women, trans people might are going through, myself included. And it's honestly, it is a disservice to people who do struggle with psychosis, especially if they also deal with gender dysphoria. Um, So my one piece of advice that I would direct at parents specifically um, is to really listen, to listen to your kid, to listen to women who have been through this, whether that's me or any of the other fabulous women who have written and made videos about this subject. Try to have some empathy for what's going on with them, and good God, stop calling it a delusion. It's not helpful. Um, so as for what I would want to say to people who are considering transition, again, what you're not going to hear from me is this is a delusion. We've been over that. The other thing you're not going to hear me say is don't do it. I don't know you. I don't have any say in what you choose to do with your body. I can't know what's in your head. I can't know what's going to turn out to be best for you. Here's what I will say. I think that there is not a whole lot of clarity on what this thing we call dysphoria, what that actually is. I think that can lead to a lot of things being interpreted as dysphoria that might, have other explanations or other ways to cope. Oh, hello. Um, and I think it's valuable to explore your dysphoria, take some time, sit with it. Come on, hop up. Um, what kinds of feelings you have towards your body, where the disconnect is. Is there some reason that you might be experiencing it? Um, And I think that can be really difficult for people, as it was difficult for me, because, again, there's not a whole lot of clarity regarding what dysphoria is. It's my opinion and my experience from my own life, from talking to other dysphoric females, other detransition women, that it's made up of a bunch of different parts. And some of these parts, are unique to the experience of the dysphoric person. Some of them are, maybe genetic, maybe environmental, maybe a mix of the two. We just don't know at this point. But because of that, I think that when we view it as this kind of monolithic entity, when we take this huge cluster of feelings and experiences and ideas, and we put that all in this little box that we label dysphoria, I think that really cuts off our ability to really understand and to dissect all of these different parts. So, a few things that women I know have identified as pieces of their dysphoria are things like sexual trauma or eating disorders. Can you stop that? Or, dissociative disorders, mental health issues, parental abuse, partner abuse, lesbophobia, just the effects of living in a misogynist culture, particularly as a gender nonconforming woman. Um, and I think a lot of people see this, see detransition women talking about this, and they think, well, that's not why I want to transition. I have dysphoria, that's different. Well, I mean, I don't think a lot of us, I don't think most of us thought we were transitioning for those reasons either. I certainly didn't. I didn't transition, because I thought consciously that, I'm not being treated well for being female, and I should escape that, or I don't want to be a lesbian. I should escape that. It would make my body issues go away. Those feelings manifested on the surface, as this disconnect, as this discomfort, as dissociation from femaleness, and I think that can be really hard to figure that out. Because you have to be able to, look past those thoughts and feelings that you're having and not take them at face value. And that's very hard to do because these are very compelling ideas, especially when you have, this set of steps that's going to make everything better. And, you know, when you're so disconnected from yourself, when you're so dissociated from yourself, the idea of that kind of introspection, of getting to know yourself better, of really being present in your body, being present with the thoughts and the feelings that you're having, it can be very daunting. It can be really easy to just say, well, that's just how I feel. So let me give you an example. When I was transitioning, I had a lot of dysphoria, in general, about my voice, about my breasts, about my body shape, so on and so forth. And when you're parsing that as that monolith, as dysphoria, it looks like a lot of really confusing things. And they don't seem to have, common causes, but they all or, causes that you can identify, but they all have one solution, which is transition, which is, again, going to make everything better. But, don't look at it at that face value. You need to break it down, Let's just look at one piece, let's look at voice. I never got the chance to reconcile with my natural voice, as you can probably tell from listening to me. And when I was transitioning, I saw my dislike of my voice as just part of this whole, another facet of dysphoria. My voice just didn't sound male, and that was the problem. But looking back, I can see those motivations. I can see the ideas and the thoughts and the feelings behind that voice dysphoria. When I was pre-testosterone, I had a super high squeaky voice. I had a great singing voice. It wasn't like super annoying, but I felt like nobody took me seriously because of it. I wanted an authoritative voice. I wanted a rich voice, a voice that people listened to, that people took seriously. And instead I was stuck with this fucking Minnie Mouse voice. It seemed like such an intrinsic, dislike at the time. And and it didn't come up as, oh, I want people to take my voice seriously. It just comes up as this, this disconnect. This isn't me. This isn't what I should sound like. So it seems like such an intrinsic thing, but it wasn't. Um, and there are different causes, different influences that made me want to change my voice, made me disconnect from my natural voice. Then the things that made me hate my boobs or my hips or my vulva or whatever. They're all different parts, and they don't necessarily have the same causes. So a good friend of mine, we were talking recently about detransition, about dysphoria, and she said to me, the important thing is just to stay open to those questions, to look at yourself with that critical eye, and to not accept those just because answers. And she said, when you get to a just because answer, that might mean that you're not ready to answer that question quite yet, and that's okay. We have our own stages of processing, but emotions don't happen just because. There's reasons behind them. You may just not be ready to see them yet. Um, so one thing that I do hear a lot as a way of telling if transition is right for you, is this idea that you imagine yourself as older. Imagine yourself 10, 20, 30 years older, and see whether you can picture yourself as a man or a woman. The issue with this, well, there's a few issues with this, but a lot of the time, when you're dysphoric, that comes with depression, it comes with dissociation, it comes with suicidal ideation. All of those things make it really difficult to envision a viable future for yourself at all. When I was 15 and contemplating, transitioning, I couldn't see myself as a 25, 35, 45-year-old woman. I couldn't see myself at that age in any capacity. But I could project myself onto this idea of this man that I was going to become, this someone else, and I think it fed into a lot of that escapism, that I think can be very common with dysphoria. This idea of kind of adopting a new identity, a new persona, and one that you kind of have control over creating. And I think that's probably part of the reason people talk about dead names, or describe their pre-transition selves like like there was some dead relative they never really cared for. Don't try to think of it that way. Think about what needs transition will meet for you. As the person you are now. Think about what it materially affects in your life and why it is you want that, because you're still going to be the same person after you transition. I mean, you won't, because you're never the same person, but you'll be the same person. Um, so that's I think what people need to be able to do is to look at that, look at what it's going to affect, look at what needs it's going to meet, and why you want those needs to be met in that particular way. And when you figure that out, explore it. I'm not going to tell you what's an acceptable reason to transition. That's entirely, that's up to you. What's important to me is that people think about it. That's what I'm really after. My ideal is not necessarily that, nobody transition, or that everyone should detransition or whatever. I just think that we need to be able to have these critical discussions about what exactly this thing we call dysphoria is or might be, or what kind of things might look like dysphoria. Are there options that work as well for transition, as work as well as transition for some people? Are there options that might work better? Really what I want to get across is to stay critical and to keep questioning, because I think that complacency, of taking yourself completely at face value all the time is something that really inhibits growth. It makes you stagnant. It limits your ability to call out inconsistencies in your own narratives. It limits your ability to call out inconsistencies in other people's narratives about you. Wherever that questioning ends up taking you, I think that's the important part. As long as you're thinking about it, be critical and explore, and make the best decision that you can, and don't stay there. Once you've made that decision, stay critical. even if you've already made your decision, if you're committed to transition, stay open, listen to yourself. I try my best to do the same, as a detransition person, to continue to think about what I'm feeling, what I'm doing, what I could be doing instead to manage dysphoria. So I think the best advice that I can give is just to stay curious.